Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're really going to dig deep into the Personal MBA, a book that promises to be like, a no-nonsense guide to doing business right.
Yeah, and one of the things I found refreshing about this book is that it doesn't shy away from challenging the traditional ways of thinking about
It
business.
kind of jumps right in, doesn't it? Like, even
Mm.
questioning if getting an MBA is really worth it nowadays.
And what makes that critique even more interesting is the author's own story. He actually walked away from, get this, a Fortune 500 job offer to write this book.
Really? Wow, that takes guts. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is.
Exactly. So when he talks about the downsides of the MBA system, he's not just some armchair critic. He's speaking from experience.
Makes you wonder what he saw that made him walk away from a gig like that.
Well, he argues that a lot of MBA programs, they're still stuck in the old ways of doing things, teaching outdated models and leaving graduates saddled with tons of debt.
And he even crunched the numbers to show that for some of those big-name MBAs, the long-term return on your investment, what you actually get back for all that time and money, can actually be negative.
Yeah, you heard that right, negative. That's a scary thought.
Definitely makes you think twice, right?
Yeah.
So even if we're not, planning to apply to Harvard Business School anytime soon, this book got me thinking.
It's like a wake-up call to be more critical about any investment we're making in our education or skills.
Right, like always asking ourselves, what am I really going to get out of this? Is this knowledge or this skill actually going to help me reach my goals?
Exactly. So instead of just blindly following the traditional path, the personal MBA encourages us to take control of our own business education, to really focus on what truly matters, understanding those fundamental principles of how businesses actually work.
And this book breaks it down into three main areas, right? How people operate, how systems function, and then how those two come together to create value.
Yeah, it's like think of it like trying to bake a cake. You can follow a recipe step by step, right?
Sure.
But if you actually understand the chemistry, like the why behind how those ingredients work together, that's where the real magic
I
happens.
like that.
Right. It allows you to adapt, experiment, maybe even come up with your own signature cake. You're not just stuck with the same old recipe.
Okay, so the personal MBA, it's not just giving us a recipe to follow blindly. It wants to teach us the chemistry of, business success, right?
Right, exactly. It's about equipping yourself with knowledge that you can adapt to different situations, not just memorizing a bunch of rules.
So where do we start with these fundamentals then? What's
Yeah.
the first key ingredient in this recipe for business success?
Well, the book starts with this concept called the iron law of the market. And this is big. This can make or break any business idea.
Ooh, okay, now you've got my attention. The iron law of the market, huh? Tell me more.
So this iron law thing, it might seem kind of obvious when you first hear it, but honestly, it's something that even people who have been in business for a while can forget sometimes.
Okay, now you got me curious. What exactly is this iron law of the market?
Basically, it says that the most important thing is market demand. More important than having a super talented team, a killer product, or even an amazing marketing campaign.
Wait, really? So you're telling me you could have the most brilliant idea in the world, but if there aren't enough people out there who want it, you're sunk.
That's exactly what it say. And the book actually uses the Segway as an example.
Right, the Segway. Those two-wheeled self-balancing scooters.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Remember
I
those.
do. For a while there, it seemed like they were going to be, the NEG-XT big thing. I even
Uh,
got to try one out once at this tech conference I went to. They were super cool, but maybe a little ahead of their time or something.
exactly. And that's the thing. It was a cool invention, for sure. Well-funded, lots of hype, but at the end of the day, it totally flopped. And the reason? Not enough market demand. People just weren't ready to ditch their cars and their bikes for a Segway commute.
Wow. Tough lesson, but definitely an important one. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of an idea without stopping to think okay, but is there actually a need for this out there in the real world?
Totally. It's like falling in love with the solution before you even fully understand the problem.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap? How can we make sure that our business idea actually has legs?
Validation. That's the key. The book really stresses how important it is to validate your idea before you go all in.
So no more holing up in your garage for years, working on some invention that no one asked for.
Exactly. You got to get out there, do your research, talk to actual potential customers, and figure out if people are actually willing to pay for what you're offering.
Right, because at the end of the day, you're building a business, not just a cool project for yourself. Speaking of what we're offering, the book then goes on to lay out this whole buffet of options, like 12 different ways you can actually create value for customers.
It's wild, right? You've got everything from the familiar things we see every day to some pretty surprising models.
I'm ready to dig in. Let's unpack a few, starting with some of the more common ones.
Okay, well, the book starts with products and services. Those are two of the biggies, right?
Yeah, products. Pretty self-explanatory, the tangible goods, the things you can hold in your hand.
Exactly. But here's the thing that's interesting. Products, they're often duplicatable. Think of like a book. The author writes it once, but then you can print and distribute millions of copies, right? That's how you create value at scale.
Right. Which brings us to services, actions, or activities that you're performing for a customer.
And services can be really lucrative, especially if you've got specialized skills or knowledge that are hard to come by. But the trade-off is they can be a lot harder to duplicate or scale compared to like a physical product.
That makes sense. You're limited by time, by the expertise of the person providing the service. You can't just magically create more hours in the day.
Exactly. But now let's move beyond products and services for a sec, because the book gets into some really cool, less obvious forms of value, like shared resources, for example.
Shared resources, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Give me an example of that.
So think of things like gyms, co-working spaces, even something like a public park.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Right. These are all assets that multiple people can use. You're not buying the asset outright. You're paying for the ability to use it, to have access to it.
So instead of owning a gym, you pay a monthly fee, and you get to work out there alongside other people.
Exactly. And this model works because the cost of that resource, like in the gym example, the cost of the equipment, the upkeep, it's all spread out over all those different users. The trick is finding that sweet spot where you've got enough people to make it work financially, but not so many that the whole thing gets overcrowded and unpleasant.
Right, because nobody wants to fight for a treadmill at the gym. Suddenly that monthly fee doesn't seem like such a good deal anymore.
For sure. Okay, another interesting one the book talks about is leasing.
Leasing, so basically renting something, right? Cars, apartments.
Wow.
These days you can even lease office equipment.
You got it. Leasing is all about giving people access to something without the responsibility of full ownership.
It's another way to access value, often at a price point that makes more sense for people,
Yeah.
right? Okay, what about agency? That one caught my eye.
Yes, agency. So this is all about acting on someone else's behalf, usually leveraging specialized knowledge or connections that they don't have.
So like real estate agents, talent agents, even travel agents.
Yeah, exactly. They're creating value by connecting buyers and sellers or representing their clients in negotiations.
Okay, this next one really jumped out at me. Audience aggregation. It seems like this is exactly what social media influencers and media companies are doing, right?
100%. You hit the nail on the head. Audience aggregation is all about building up a big audience of people who share some common interests. And then what do? You sell access to that audience to advertisers or other companies that want to reach those people. The bigger and more engaged your audience, the more valuable it becomes.
It's like that saying, attention is the new currency.
You got it. Okay, then you've got the more, let's say, traditional form of value, which is capital.
As in financial capital, money that you can invest to generate returns.
Exactly. It's using money to make more money, basically. But the key here is obviously you have to invest wisely if you want to be successful. You got to find those businesses or ventures that have real potential for growth and profitability.
Makes sense. Okay, this next one, hassle premium. I'll be honest, I had to reread this section a couple of times to really wrap my head around it. Can you break it down for me?
Sure. So hassle premium basically means that you can get away with charging more for something simply because it's a pain for the customer to do it themselves. It's like a premium you're charging for convenience.
Okay, so like paying someone to put together your furniture or mow your lawn, things I could technically do myself, but like I'd much rather just pay someone else to deal with it.
Exactly. People are often totally willing to pay a premium to avoid a hassle. Think about it. Time is money too. The bigger the hassle, the higher that premium you can charge.
Man, this whole section on the 12 forms of value has been a real eye-opener. It makes you realize, like, there's so many different ways to build a successful business. It's not all about just, like, creating product and hoping for the best.
Totally. It's about being creative, resourceful, and really understanding what your customers value, whether it's a physical product, a helpful service, access to a resource, or just taking a hassle off their plate.
It's all about identifying a genuine need in the market and then figuring out the best way to meet that need, to deliver that value however you can.
And you know what that leads to? That brings us to another super important concept from the book, which is all about testing those ideas and being willing to iterate, to make changes along the way. The personal MBA is all about getting real-world feedback instead of trying to perfect everything in secret.
So what you're saying is instead of spending years and years holed up in our metaphorical garage trying to perfect our product or service, we should be getting it out there sooner, even if it's not perfect yet. Like put it out there, see how people react, get that feedback, and use it to make it even better.
Yes, exactly. It's so much less risky that way, because you're minimizing how much you're investing up front and you're maximizing what you can learn.
Do you have any favorite examples of businesses that have used this approach, this minimum viable offer approach successfully?
Well, the book mentions Fitbit. So the founders, they actually started out by testing their idea with a super simple prototype, something they just threw together using off-the-shelf components. They weren't worried about having this sleek, polished product at that stage. They just wanted to see if people were even interested in this whole idea of tracking their steps, tracking their activity levels.
So they were testing the core concept before they went and sunk a ton of money into manufacturing and marketing, all that. Smart. What else? Give me more examples. I love this.
Okay, another good one is using a simple landing page to test interest in a product that, doesn't even exist yet.
Wait, what? How does that work?
So you create this page, right? And you describe your amazing product. You highlight all the benefits, maybe include some mock-ups or visuals, and then you see if you can get people to sign up for a wait list or pre-order it. It's a super low-cost way to validate your idea before you write a single line of code or manufacture a single unit.
I love it. It's like dipping your toes in the water before you cannonball into the deep end. So these minimum viable offers, it's all about getting real-world data, as quickly as possible, replacing those assumptions with cold, hard evidence.
Exactly. The personal MBA is all about embracing that process of testing, learning, refining, and it never really ends. You're always iterating, always responding to feedback, always trying to make your offering the best it can be.
It's like you're constantly fine-tuning, making adjustments along the way.
Exactly. It's like you wouldn't bake a cake and just hope for the best without ever checking on it or adjusting the temperature, right?
Oh, tell me about it. I think I adjust my oven temperature 3 times every time I bake a cake.
There you go. It's the same idea. You got to be willing to make those adjustments as you go. Okay, so the personal MBA, it's giving us this framework, right? This new way of approaching business and success.
It definitely challenges you to think differently, that's for sure. Questioning those assumptions we all make, being more resourceful, being okay with experimenting, and just, never stop learning.
And that's what I really appreciate about this book. It's not about memorizing some set of rules or some magic formula. It's about understanding the deeper principles at play, the stuff that applies no matter what business you're in, or even if you're just navigating the world with a more entrepreneurial mindset.
It's about so much more than just starting a business, isn't it? It's about a way of thinking, a way of approaching problems and opportunities. Well, I gotta say, this has been a really insightful deep dive. Thanks for breaking it all down with me.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
For sure. And listeners, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the personal MBA. Hopefully you're walking away with some new ideas, maybe some new tools you can use, and a little more confidence to get out there and create something awesome.
And remember, the journey's never really over. Keep learning, keep adapting, keep iterating.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep those entrepreneurial brains fired up.